Right now, though, very happy to have with us, as he is regularly, the Premier of Saskatchewan, Brad Wall, who takes time to speak to you, answer your questions directly on the radio. Premier Wall, thanks for being here today.
Morning, Murray.
Listen, I want to start off before anything. The Court of Appeal decision just came down on a couple of pieces of your government's legislation, and it's a victory for your government. It upheld two of those pieces of legislation, the Essential Services Act and the Trade Union Act Amendment. And the Court of Appeal says it cites a Supreme Court ruling that says freedom of association does not comprehend the right to strike. And so the decision goes on to say that while the court's freedom of association jurisprudence has evolved, it has not shifted far enough to warrant a ruling that the right to strike is protected by the Charter. I'm curious. I'd like to get your reaction on the ruling today from the Court of Appeal.
Well, we think the rulings are positive. When we took office in 2007, Murray, we indicated publicly that this province of ours was one of only two that didn't have essential services legislation, and we thought that it should. And we crafted the legislation, and it was challenged, of course. And there was an initial decision that, as you've described, and in that particular decision, there was now new questions around whether the right to strike was a charter right. Now, that was a real concern for us, and we appealed, and so we're very pleased with the decision. The Attorney General and the Minister of Labour are looking at the decision carefully, and I think we'll have a more detailed response from the Minister of Labour later this day.
Well, in the meantime, and both sides have said that this will likely be appealed to the Supreme Court, so it's probably not over yet. But in the meantime, your government moved ahead with some new labour consultation and some new packages. Would you now go back and reinstate these bills?
There were some amendments we were considering as a result, not just of the decision, but some review that we were doing, some discussions we had with various unions on the essential services piece. I don't think we're going to change that process. I think together with our partners, we're going to look at improvements. I did say at the time that there was a real concern around that initial decision over consultation, which is why we've taken a much longer period of time for consultation on Bill 85, and I think that part of the initial ruling was instructive and helpful, and so we've actually carried through with the spirit of that ruling on the consultation piece on the current labor changes before the legislature. And with respect to amendments or any changes we would want to do to essential services in partnership with the public sector unions in particular, I think we're going to continue with those.
Okay. One of the things that raised concern at the time that the courts looked at and that your government has talked about in the aftermath has been the number of people who were put on the lists of essential services. Is that something that the government recognizes may have gone too far, or is this vindication for the direction the government had taken initially?
Well, I do think obviously it is vindication for the original approach of the government. That's not to say we shouldn't be open to improvements. At the bottom line for us having essential services in the province is that basically is the security of the public, is the health of the people of the province. Should there be some sort of a workplace interruption in Saskatchewan, and so that's the guiding principle. We're absolutely committed to it. This is a point of disagreement we have with our opposition, who have said they would remove the essential services. We believe we need that, like most provinces have it. However, I think we'll always be open to ensuring that it's workable, ensuring that we haven't lost touch with the first principle of essential services, and that's basically the protection and the health and safety of Saskatchewan people should there ever be some sort of a work stoppage.
All right, Premier Brad Wall is here for the hour to take your phone calls, your questions at 1-877-332-8255. You can text questions as well to 306-306. I have to ask you about this, Premier. George Jones passed away this morning, and I know you're a big fan.
I am a big fan of George Jones, and it's kind of a sad day. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of new music coming from the possum here lately, but I think it's a sad day for country music fans. You know what, Marie? In honor of George Jones, I was just thinking of not calling in today because, of course, his nickname was No Show.
No Show Jones. Exactly
but
right.
I thought, maybe that wouldn't go over very well. I just tweeted out a quick, he stopped loving her today, and hashtag RIP George Jones, and there is a lot of George Jones fans in Saskatchewan and Western Canada because it's getting retweeted quite a bit. So there's many fans out there, I think, that are remembering him today.
I think George Jones transcended country music. I mean, a lot of rock artists look at George Jones as being a great singer that was influential to them.
Absolutely. Well, and a real pioneer. I mean, I think most folks would know, his blockbusters, He Stopped Loving Her Today, and Picture of Me Without You, and the Grand Tour, and those ones are well known and very country, but early on, there's a bit of rockabilly there as well. There's sort of some crossover, and so I think that's probably why there's lots of genres, musicians in different genres that have a lot of time for the possum.
Well, since we're talking music, I mean, you had a big musical moment this week as you announced Paul McCartney coming to Saskatchewan. I'm going to guess you didn't have to be on the line yesterday fighting for tickets like some people were, but tell me about your excitement level as regards Paul McCartney, because how do you rate Paul as compared to, because I know Elvis is your idol.
Yeah. Well, but the chances of Elvis appearing at Mosaic Stadium are diminishing with each year that passes. Even for those who might believe he didn't die in August of 1977. But it's obviously very big. It's been a while since we've had the big outdoor concert at Mosaic. And so it's great for the province to have that. Obviously, with Paul McCartney, there's another huge pioneer in music, and the Beatles stuff's going to be great. And then, of course, there's all the Wings material as well. So I think it's going to be quite a night at Mosaic.
Premier Brad Wall is here to take your phone calls. You introduced emergency legislation yesterday on cyberbullying. Maybe explain the gist of the motion.
Well, it was inspired by the tragedies we've seen in Canada, in Atlantic Canada, and then in British Columbia with Amanda Todd's suicide last year. There was some discussion happening already with the ministers of justice from across the country and the federal minister of justice on the potential of adding to the criminal code of Canada the offense of publishing someone's picture without consent. This is one of the most insidious and sort of brutal forms of cyberbullying, and when young people take their lives, bullying doesn't seem like strong enough a word. I agree with the Prime Minister on that front, and so credit to Premier Dexter in Nova Scotia and Riteus Mom and Dad, who have really taken the issue to Ottawa. Credit the Prime Minister and the Federal Minister of Justice, who gathered all the other justice ministers together and resolved to step up the process, to move it more quickly, so that by June they can have a report on exactly what's possible in terms of the criminal code. I just wanted our legislature, if we could, or the day after that Justice Ministers meeting, to support that effort. So we had a debate yesterday and unanimously voted to support a resolution and transmit the resolution supporting the Ministers of Justice to move expeditiously on this.
Do you have thoughts on enforcement, how this would be enforceable? I mean, Nova Scotia's Justice Minister spoke yesterday about a law that could take away people's phones or computers in addition to fines and court actions. Does that strike you as something?
Well, I think they're going to look at all the options. They're just going to expedite the process. Certainly there is a way. We know that with the internet. There is a way to track down those who would have posted the picture. There's digital signatures that are very much at the heart of all things online. And so there's certainly ways to be able to determine who's doing these things, who's posting these pictures without consent. And by the way, this is only one part of a strategy around bullying, whether it's cyberbullying or any other form. We have Saskatoon MLA Jennifer Camp, who is currently the legislative secretary to the Minister of Education, who's going to be focused on canvassing anti-bullying initiative options from across the country and around the world, and coming back with a report so that we might have a look at that in the legislature and be able to present that to Saskatchewan people for their comment and input.
Premier Brad Wall is with us this morning for the next 40 minutes till the top of the hour. Your chance to speak directly to the Premier, ask questions, pass along some thoughts. Here's the phone number, 1-877-332-8255. You can also text at 306-306. Much more still to come. I'm Murray Wood, in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio. Your comments at 1-877-332-8255. Brad Wall here with us until the top of the hour, and the phone lines are open to you. Premier, this is a rather significant date in Saskatchewan history, April 26th. You must remember this day pretty well.
I do actually remember this date. April 26, 1982 was the election of the first Divine Majority government.
Yeah, Black Monday, as some, at least the NDP, came to call it, when the Blakeney government was just obliterated.
I think they went down to 8 seats in that particular election campaign.
What do you remember about that night?
I was in grade 11. I remember being keenly interested in politics, sort of a political nerd for a long time, Murray, is the bottom line. I remember the all-candidates forum at the Swift Current Comprehensive High School, and so I can remember I think I can remember all of the candidates' names. I think Pat White was running for the Liberals. Pat Smith went on to win for the PCs. A fellow by the name of Henry Bandman was running for the Western Canada Concept. And a teacher at the comp, I think it was Mr. Spencer Wolf, was running for the NDP. So I still remember that, and following it and watching the election night coverage with Dad, who was always very much interested in in politics. So, I remember it pretty clearly.
You have a Gormley-like political memory, I got to tell you.
Well, it's like, I think he also is a political nerd.
Well, and that was the first election I'd ever covered. And what I remember about that night was nobody really saw the size of the victory coming. And seeing people like Roy Romano going down to defeat to people who were, political unknowns, it was a remarkable night in Saskatchewan politics.
I had a chance to talk about that. It's very interesting. A couple of occasions recently, Murray. One was we attended Peter Lougheed's funeral not long ago, and I invited Premiers Lougheed and Romano to come along. They had both served with him, and so we spent some time together. It was very interesting to see that dynamic and their discussion and about all of that political history. And then a little bit later on at Premier Klein's funeral again with Premier Romano to discuss those times and just the scale of the victory and what's ensued after that, not just in terms of politics here, but Canadian politics, because of course in the intervening years we've had a lot of federal-provincial dynamics that Saskatchewan's played a role through Mr. Romano, for example, and through Mr. Devine on Meech Lake and Charlottetown, and it's a pretty fascinating discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I wanted to come to a topic that your government made news on again this week, and that was dominating discussion just last hour on Open Phones. The move to increase safety in construction traffic zones, road zones where construction is being done. And among the measures, highway traffic officers being allowed to give out tickets, much stiffer fines for people who speed through those zones. But most notably, I think for a lot of people, the introduction of photo radar in Saskatchewan. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation started us off expressing a concern it may not do anything in the moment to stop dangerous drivers who may be going through. Explain why your government feels that this will improve safety.
Well, I think penalties do work, and the assurance that you're going to get caught, which is greater if you've got a camera in an orange zone, I think helps if you combine it with more stricter laws, but also heavier penalties. I think the combination of those things do help. I think people understand, look, if they're not already understanding, given what happened in this province last summer, they will understand that if I'm not abiding by the law, the construction zone laws, there's a great likelihood they'll get a picture of my license plate, I'm going to get a big fine. And I just think we have to try absolutely everything to ensure the safety of those who are working in those orange zones, and that's what these measures are all about.
The issue of catching people in the moment, safety in the moment, if that driver is impaired, if that driver is really driving dangerously, the argument is that a couple of weeks later a ticket in the mail that does not include a surcharge in their license won't have the effect of stopping that dangerous driver in the moment, though.
Well, although we now have, with highway traffic officers, able to do what they're going to do, we have more sort of points of contact, points of enforcement, if you will, that are specific, much more specific in terms of who is empowered, and more broad in terms of who is empowered to enforce these things. So I think that helps. I mean, I don't think there is a law or a measure government can take that can completely, obviously, eliminate some of the things that you've just highlighted, but we should try. We really need to try these measures, all measures that might be reasonable and possible to protect the safety of those working in an orange zone, and that's what this is all about. One
concern being expressed is that this is the entry point, that photo radar will then move on to other areas in the province and general use. Is that a possibility?
Well, we have mayors that have been very interested in that possibility. I'd say the provincial government hasn't seen the compelling case for its expansion, but I'm sure some mayors may continue to try to make that case, and we always take those meetings, but right now we don't necessarily see the case for its expansion anywhere else.
All right, when we come back with Premier Brad Wall, the phone line's open to you, 1-877-332-8255. We have some questions for the Premier coming in as well on text at 306-306. You can also send to my email, mwood@rocco.com. I'm Murray Wood, sitting in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio. Welcome back. I'm Murray Wood, sitting in for John Gormley. It is a session of Ask the Premier. Premier Brad Wall here for the entire hour till the top of this hour to take your questions, your comments at 1-877-332-8255. You can text questions as well to 306-306. Here's a question for you, Premier, from the text. One person wants to know, when is the government going to move forward on either establishing a provincial athletics commission or allowing cities to establish? The UFC and MMA sports are bypassing our province and are huge revenue generators for facilities.
Well, it's true. The UFC has said they will not be doing business in here or any other province that doesn't have their own commission. Our minister, Jim Ryder, was commenting on this in March. I think there was some public discussion at that time. We're having those discussions now, and I think very much open to input from Saskatchewan people and our municipal partners who are going to be sort of at the center of this in terms of what we want happening in Saskatchewan, what people may not want happening in the province. We are right now canvassing what other jurisdictions do, and there is some notion that the federal government might sort of move on regulations. So we're waiting to see if that's the case. But we're not pausing completely. We are engaged in some discussions, and the text that's come in, I would say to the author of the text, they should probably get a hold of their MLA and express what their opinion might be, because we are having this discussion and seeking input on whether or not we want want the commissions here for MMA or other athletic endeavors, boxing. If you do that, obviously you can have these UFC events here and others like it. Some may strongly support it, but others I've heard from who do not. So this is a good public discussion to have.
Phil is in Yorkton. You're on the air with the Premier. Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry I couldn't hear you. I'm getting old. My question for the Premier is pretty simple. I want to thank him, first of all, for clawing back for us, our motorcycle guys, some of that insurance hike that they were looking at. But my question would be, last year we did have an increase on our bikes that nobody really knew about because it took place after motorcycle season, and we all started driving our cars and trucks, etc. I'm wondering why, or if there was any thought given to going back on that as well, because with that increase and even the small increase we're going to get, it's still going to be a pretty good buck for some of us.
Thanks, Phil. There's no plans to make the changes to go retroactive in terms of what happened in the previous year. That's the very direct answer, though. As you know, we did change the government's position, the application, so to speak, with respect to what would have been for some a huge rate increase. Now, it is true that the problem that's trying to be addressed by the Auto Fund in all of this is that one class of licenses are subsidizing another class in terms of their actual costs, because we know the costs around motorcycle accidents are much higher, and there is a cumulative subsidy that occurs then. And so we do think we have to move to limit that. But there are a number of options we may be able to consider in terms of the kinds of products that Sask Auto offers to those who want to ride and license their bikes, obviously. And that might mean different kinds of coverage, a much more basic coverage with the onus on the rider if they want to do some other things in terms of replacement of income if it's ever lost due to an accident. So I think we're going to be open going forward to different ideas. And as you know, we did pause this one and say, look, these hikes are onerous, and so let's see if we can have a smaller increase and then look to some longer term solutions that are a bit more sustainable, both for the Auto Fund but also those who ride bikes. All
right, Mary is listening in Spring Valley. You're on the air with Premier Brad Wall.
Yes, hello. I just have a question regarding all this talk about bullying. People are bullied for a large variety of reasons, and it seems that what always comes to the forefront is the homosexuals, and they always want the right to their gay-straight alliances. And we've seen recently in Ontario that the Catholic school system was forced to allow the gay-straight alliances. And I'm just wondering what you're going to do in Saskatchewan to ensure that the Catholic schools aren't going to be forced to do the same.
Well, there's no limits right now. We have gay-straight alliances that are happening in schools today in the province. I think as well there's been the indication, at least from one separate division that was in the news recently, that they're possible for the Catholic divisions as well, and it came in the wake of an application from a young student, I think, in Regina. So there's nothing that prohibits the formation of GSAs today. Neither are we contemplating sort of the prescription or the compelling of any particular group. But what we want to do is we want to look at every possible initiative to ensure that kids feel safe at school so that they have a place to go to if need be, whether it's a club in school. I noted that I think it was the Archdiocese in Ontario proposed something which would be basically the same, called a Respecting Differences clubs. So I'm not sure if they're going to do anything with that in Ontario. The bottom line is what we want to ensure, of course, is that nobody's bullied at school for any reason. And that's the intent of any initiative we bring forward. But there's nothing that's preventing GSAs today in Saskatchewan. And I think that's true of both the public and separate system.
Right, and I'm taking it then, Premier, that you would not favor something that would restrict that.
Well, I don't think we need. First of all, all, that sounds like legislation. I'm not sure we need another law with respect to whatever we come with in terms of anti-bullying initiatives when Jennifer Campo, our MLA, who's looking at it, reports. There are some specific things that we can do that we're already doing through the website, through communications for this issue, and there's also the cyberbullying issue, which we've already talked about in the show. So, I think that question seems to be conditional on legislation, and I'm not sure that's going to be necessary in the end.
1-877-332-8255 is the number. If you'd like to speak to Premier Wall directly, you can text at 306-306 as well. Frank is in Regina. Go ahead, Frank.
Yes, good morning, Premier Wall. In regard to the photo radar, I don't have, in the orange zones, I don't have a problem with it so long as the orange zones actually have people working in them when the signs are posted. And how about a substantial fine for construction companies that don't take these signs up or close them down in time?
This is a very good and a very fair point, as we've had this very useful discussion around orange zone safety, as we've sort of sought to improve safety in the orange zones for those who work. We've had a lot of motorists who have weighed in and told our MLAs and told me, and through social media, they've just gotten this message out that an orange zone needs to be about a place where there's people working. Obviously, that's who we're trying to protect, those workers. And so it's really up to those who are doing the work on the highways to ensure that there's the proper signage, and that, frankly, improper signage in terms of where the work's not happening is not there. It's taken down. And so it's something I think the Highways Ministry is going to be looking at very carefully in terms of contractors that are doing the road work. It's a message that's been given, but I'm happy for the call, because it reinforces something we've been hearing over the last year, that this is an important part of having the orange zone safety piece work.
Yeah, I can foresee people contacting our newsroom soon saying, I got a ticket from Photo Radar in a orange zone where there was nobody working, and I can already anticipate this happening, Premier.
Well, and that's obviously what we want to avoid. I'm not sure it can be completely avoided, but that will be the intent. That's going to be the effort we make to do that, because there needs to be photo radar where we're trying to protect those working in an orange zone, not where there aren't folks working and people are getting a ticket without the core reason.
1-877-332-8255 is the number to call. If you'd like to speak directly to the Premier, you can text at 306-306 as well. Ron and Regina, go ahead. You're on the air, Ron.
Yeah. On the subject of bullying, you realize that you are bullying the smokers and the drinkers in this province, when all the people in this province benefit from increased taxes or on the smokers and the drinkers. Why isn't the whole province contributing to it? We seem to have funds to provide free needles to drug addicts, yet we just keep going like drug lords and attacking the drinkers and the smokers on and on and on.
So, Ron, you're unhappy about the increases in the last budget?
You betcha.
All right, Premier, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, the last budget did have increases in terms of the so-called sin taxes, or taxes on tobacco and alcohol. You sort of look across the country, you see a lot of the budgets have the same thing. I don't think we're going to see the end of this anytime soon. I don't care what government's in power. These are products that are subject, obviously, to provincial taxes, and because of the nature of what we're talking about here, and frankly, the correlation in terms of a public health care system and these particular products. I think you're going to. I don't want the caller to think this is going to end. I'm not sure that would be fair to have him think that. I think this is going to continue, regardless of who the government happens to be here or, frankly, elsewhere in the country.
Premier, there was something notable for your government this week. You cleared a waiting list. You cleared it entirely for people with intellectual disabilities looking for work or for care homes. Tell me what that meant to you.
Well, it meant a lot. Early on in our government, the then Social Services Minister, Donna Harpower, came and reported to Cabinet there was roughly 440 people with an intellectual disability on a waiting list. What they were waiting for is the dignity of a home, a group home space, or in some cases family was waiting for respite programming, day programming, And so the Minister of Social Services at the time, Donna Harpower, carried through by the current Minister, June Droughty, put together a plan to deal with it, identified a budget of, we thought about $70 million required. The good news is about $52 million, but still a significant amount. And I think an investment, by the way, that the people of the province would say that is really what government should be doing and should be all about, so they'd be good with it. I'd hope that'd be the case. And so, 4 years later or so, we're at the end of the list, give or take. In Swift Current, for example, we have Southwest Homes, who do a great job as an NGO providing these spaces. They had a wait list of 25, roughly, or so at the time of our election in 2007 to government, and this always bothered me. And so that list was eliminated. That 25 was eliminated. Everyone had a place to live, and the programming was there. Now, some people have moved to town, and so we think there's a few more now waiting. We need to be vigilant to ensure that doesn't happen. In this province, we have a goal of being the best place in Canada for those who have disabilities and for their families. So we need to be very vigilant. This is at the core, I think, of what government should be about, and we're going to continue to try to ensure that wait list is non-existent as possible, or at least just transitional.
Premier Brad Wall is with us until the top of the hour. The phone lines are open to you at 1-877-332-8255. I'm Murray Wood, in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio. Welcome back. I'm Murray Wood, in for John Gormley. The Premier of Saskatchewan, Brad Wall, is with us until the top of the hour. Let's get right back to the phone lines. Rod is on the line. You're on the air with Premier Wall.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My question about the orange zone, the construction zone. I'm a road builder in this province for 20 years. To my mind, the photo radar does nothing to stop anyone from speeding through the orange zone. It only punishes them for doing that. My idea was the portable speed bumps. We lay them down when we get there. We do our job. We pick them up when we leave. They're never left there when we're not there, and they slow you down. They don't punish you for after the fact. It's proactive rather than reactive. I'm wondering why the province didn't look more at something like that.
Well, we are. It's actually on the list of measures that we're taking. Now, I'm not sure about the specific portable speed bump that you're talking about, but what we announced earlier this month is that we're going to be using rumble strips. We're going to be using what's notionally known as gates, especially in the high traffic areas. But I think this kind of thing can be expanded if we really see it working as we believe it might, and as obviously you do as well. And so they were implemented in some places last fall. They're going to be placed on major construction projects, is what we've announced, and they are intended to slow people down in the orange zone, entering the orange zone. So we're going to be looking at those kinds of things as well, not just looking at them, but doing them.
Marlene is in Moose Jaw. You're on the air with Premier Wall.
Hello.
Hi, Marlene.
Yes. There was a bad accident here again yesterday on 9th Avenue and number 1 highway.
Right.
How many more people are going to get hurt before they'll put a light or something there? Like every year they tell us the same thing. But when the cars are coming east, they kind of come over a rise there, and you don't see them till they're right on top of you.
Marlene, I drive that highway almost every day, and between us going back and forth here to work, and so there's that one. There's a number of other ones. I tell you what I will do, Marie. We'll get the Highways Ministry to report back perhaps on some of the data around this particular intersection in terms of accidents, and we'll be able to share with the listeners then about just how this intersection is faring in terms of driver safety.
Excellent. Okay, let's go back to the phone lines. Jack is in Lumsden. You're on the air with Premier Brad Wall.
Good to hear the Premier this morning. I just wanted to ask him what his thoughts are for protecting the community pastures. There's a big lobby on this now, and it's 20% left of the original pasture land in the province. Just saw the announcements that 1/3 of our exports are through our agricultural system in the province, and I'm wondering how we're going to protect that infrastructure and that land resource for the future of our cattle and agricultural industry.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. He's absolutely right. Huge export numbers we reported where we've actually exceeding British Columbia in terms of exports, $32 billion last year, and so that actually puts us ahead of British Columbia Columbia. Not bad for a province without any ports.
Yeah, no kidding.
Although given how the melt is going, some would maybe argue the point over the next week or so anyway. But I would just say that those same producers that are responsible for fully a third of those exports that we've just reported on, and such a strong and robust agricultural sector, they are excellent stewards of the land. And that's true whether it's their own or whether they lease it or whether they're community pastures. And so what we've said in the wake of this is a federal government initiative, as you know, Murray, where the federal government is wanting to get out of these pastures. We are working very closely with the patrons, those who use it, to make sure that, first of all, the pastures are available to those who use it, and that they're sustainable, that they're the asset they are currently. But, we're very fortunate for those who, well, Murray, you're a hunter. As you go around the province, we have agricultural producers in Saskatchewan who, yes, they're in the business of making a living off the land, but as a result of that, they take care of it. They're good stewards, and we're confident that that's going to continue with a new arrangement with those same patrons on those pastures.
Well, what about the move, though, by groups like the FSIN and there's a coalition of other groups that are trying to ensure that this stays in some sort of public ownership?
I think as we've said pretty publicly, and the Agriculture Minister has said, we're not forcing the disposition of the assets when we inherit them from the province. We're looking at something very much like the status quo with current patrons. There may be an option for some of them to down the road, if they wish to purchase some of this. We've said the same thing, by the way, with some of the other Crown land. If it's not sensitive in terms of its habitat quality, if it's not environmentally sensitive, we don't think the government has to own these things. But we're going to be very mindful of the environmental imperative here. And again, I would just say to those groups that you've mentioned and others, we have ranchers and farmers in this province who arguably, frankly, have been the best stewards of the land, especially of late as we've gotten into different farming practices, and especially when it comes to pastures. So I think we're going to proceed in a measured way, but confident that we can ensure that the sustainability of these particular land assets is maintained.
Question from the texts. Is there any chance someday the government will assist those having to use in vitro fertilization, a very expensive process, to start a family?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question, Murray?
They're wondering if the government may assist people needing to use in vitro fertilization to start a family.
As far as I know, we have no plans to change what's happening currently in Saskatchewan on that one.
Okay. Now this is a very expensive process. I think I know Quebec does. Is any other province in your understanding?
I'm not aware of any other provinces other than Quebec that provide support for that.
You mentioned flooding, Premier Wall. I know your government has been preparing, as have municipalities and local governments. This weekend may be the start of it. Are you satisfied with the preparation that your government has done at this point? And are there things you think that still need to be done?
It really depends on the magnitude of what's going to happen. This has sort of been the scenario I think we were fearing, is that the winter would be interminable, and then the switch would turn on and we'd get into double-digit temperatures and the melt comes very quickly. We've spent literally millions of dollars on mitigation over the last 2 years, as a result of the flood that we saw 2 years ago. So there's been a lot of work done together with municipalities. We've made those funds available to build berms, to do those things that will mitigate against the flood, to protect against the flood. We've improved the Provincial Disaster Assistance Program, and so we see quicker turnaround, although still not quick enough for some. We see much more generous support for people who are affected by the flood. But most importantly, in terms of these next number of weeks, we have obviously people on the ground. We have been having public meetings around the province, offering counsel and advice to municipalities and others on preparation. So I really believe that everything that could have been done has been done, and now we'll have to work together, frankly, to deal with what comes in the next week or so. All
right, well, listen, Premier Wall, appreciate you so much taking the time on this, and like everybody else this weekend, stay dry.
And to you as well, and thanks, Murray, for your time.
Premier Brad Wall, who joins us regularly to take your calls. I'm Murray Wood, in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio.